Their faces are almost forgotten in the attic of American history. But for 75 years and several generations, they were this country's throwaway children. Tens of thousands of poor, orphaned, and abandoned street kids. Gathered up, they were put on passenger trains and sent west in hopes of finding new and better lives in rural America. The trains the children rode came to be called Orphan Trains.
We didn't know where we were going because they didn't tell us kids nothing, you know, as little ones. That's a picture of our family just before I left.
More than 80 years ago,
this is me, Lela.
Lela Newcombe and two of her sisters were given up by parents who couldn't afford them.
And we three were the ones that were taken away. We didn't have much food, I know that, because I'd climb up in the cupboard to steal the baby's milk to drink it because we were hungry.
The Orphan Train era was born in the streets of mid-19th century New York City. Then, as many as 10,000 children were believed homeless.
New York was on the verge of becoming a capitalist and industrial society, but had not developed a safety net.
Stephen O'Connor has authored a book on the orphan trains.
There was terrific poverty. There's drinking, there's family violence, and a lot of these kids who were living on the street were just lost.
They were known as street Arabs. Poor and vagrant children competed with arriving European immigrants for work and money.
Kids would sell newspapers, they'd sell apples, and then they would be thieves and prostitutes, and they would con artists and pickpockets and all that. Some of them lived in up alleys, you know, in crates or in window wells. The police would then routinely gather these kids who were on the street up and put them into jail.
The dangers and desperation of the children caught the attention of Charles Loring Brace, a young Connecticut-born minister who immersed his life in their plight.
He came to New York in 1848, saw these kids, saw what the police and the city were doing to them, and was shocked by it. He said, "They're not criminals, they're kids."
So Brace created the Children's Aid Society to raise money for his ambitious plan to empty city streets of poor and homeless children and resettle them in rural America.
What he saw was that there were no jobs in the city. There were lots of jobs in the country. The country, you know, was desperate for farm labor. Why don't we take the kids from the places where there are no jobs and bring them to the places where there are lots of jobs?
Brace himself scoured the jails, orphanages, and asylums for the journey west. Ragamuffin kids, he took them, scrubbed them down, transformed them into young adults with haircuts, clothes, and shoes, and then put them on a train. As many as 150 orphans a day left from Grand Central Station to head west.
The trips often lasted 2-3 days, and the trains were noisy, they rattled, and the smoke from the engines constantly blowing in the windows. I mean, they were just really terrible things.
In states like Nebraska, local newspapers ran stories days ahead of the orphans' arrival. Potential foster parents were invited to meet the train.
Sometimes they would just be sort of shown to the public right there on the platform. And sometimes the kids would say something about themselves. Some of them would do little poems or sing songs or do a little dance. And some of them just sort of sat there terrified and glum. And the people would go around, look at the kids. Sometimes they'd feel their muscles and look at their teeth as if they were animals. And if they saw a kid who they liked for whatever reason, they would say, you know, I would like to take this child home.
The children not chosen went back on the train for more stops until they were selected.
Was it day or night when you came into
Day.
daytime?
Daytime. Sun was shining.
Lela Newcombe was 5 when she arrived at Lincoln, Nebraska's train station.
Were you nervous? Were you scared?
I can't say I was just a numb person. You know, you just done what you was told. You didn't know what to expect. I was just still waiting that some of these trains were going to take me back home. That was always in my mind, you know, going back home.
But she never did.
Yeah.
Hers was a childhood in black and blue, of physical and mental torture from a violently abusive foster mother.
She come with a strap, and she whacked me some good ones with a strap, and you don't holler, because if you holler, she got that much mad, you know, and she just really go to town on you.
You never tried to run away?
Oh yeah, I tried to kill myself 3 times.
Even so, Children's Aid Society records said that most orphans were adjusting to rural life. Charles Loring Brace even checked on many of them personally. And while documents also revealed complaints of orphan abuse, investigators often favored the foster parents' version of the story over the orphans, who, like Lela, felt helpless.
You must have thought that being an orphan must have been some kind of punishment.
Well, it was because I felt like the thing. I was a thing everywhere I went.
For most of her life, Lela Newcombe lived less than half a mile from the house she will never forget.
I don't even like to see it, talk about it, or look at it.
You feel uncomfortable even being here?
Uh-huh. It's a torture chamber. That's what it is to me. I'm sorry, I can't hold it.
So even though you lived in this town most of your life, you would never come back here?
Never. The first time I've been this close.
In 60 years, maybe?
More than that.
Well, I'm sorry we brought you back.
It's okay.
How does this fit into our history? Is it a sad chapter in our history?
Well, there's certainly plenty of tragedy associated with these children. However, it's also, it's a story of a kind of a heroic effort to try to do something to improve the life of children who were neglected and thought very little of by the rest of society. There was, a good deal of success.
2 boys who rode the same train to Indiana became governors. Andrew Burke was a North Dakota governor. John Brady became governor of Alaska.
This would be on the child's clothes.
Ann Harrison considers herself lucky, too. She was one of scores of mail-order adoptions, delivered by train with name tags sewn to their clothing, like these at the Nebraska Historical Society.
For a lot of these little kids who wore this was more of a blessing, in your opinion, than it was a curse.
Yes, those kids on the street, had they been left on the street, they would have ended up criminals, most of them, and the girls would have ended up prostitutes.
In 1928, little Ann Harrison was sent from New York by a Catholic charity and adopted by a childless Colorado couple.
They had asked for a 2.5-year-old girl with brown hair and brown eyes. Well, they got a 2.5-year-old girl that had auburn hair and hazel eyes. But that was close enough.
Raised a Catholic, she was educated, cultured, and protected. Her parents never told her she was adopted, but her father did say she'd been baptized in New York City at St. Vincent Parish. So in her 20s, Ann Harrison headed back east in search of a singing career and her own past. One day in 1935, she stopped by the church on a hunch.
A nun met me at the door, took me in, sat me in the parlor, went off, came back and said, "Oh yes, you were here." And that's the end of all the story. Don't ever expect to find out anything more.
But 50 years later, approaching her 80th birthday, Ann Harrison found out more than she'd ever imagined.
I get this letter from the New York Health Department, open it up, and there's my original birth certificate. Well, I looked at that and I just split into laughter.
Why?
Well, here I was being educated, brought up in the Catholic faith, and here I am with parents, birth parents that are Jewish. My Jewish friends said we knew it all the time.
She says she never felt cheated of her true identity, that it was just a quirk in a system trying its best for orphan children.
If they just looked at your birth certificate, they would have known you were Jewish, right? Why did they pair you up with a couple of Catholics out in Colorado Springs?
Because the New York Foundling Hospital was run by nuns, and it doesn't matter what you are when you come in there, you're going to go out a Catholic.
I do not hold any grudge for my real parents. That was their lives and their way.
Today, the last generation of Orphan Train riders feel an urgency to tell their story.
But I cherish what I have learned from all of trials and tribulation.
Even for Lela Newcombe, no matter how painful, it's a chance to be a face instead of a footnote in American history.
Well, in a way, it makes me feel like I'm not a thing anymore, I'm someone.
The largest resettlement of children in American history was hardly more than a house of cards built by one man with the best of intentions, the help of strangers, and children whose lives were changed forever. The last orphan train left for Texas in 1929.